if you're not meeting people face to face, set up meetings with them, do Zooms, get feedback, ask people, what are you seeing? Where do you think the challenges and opportunities are? And then just find a way to either within your business to make some of those changes, or maybe you say, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing for me, shut it down and pivot and do something else. So part of that comes back to having the mental and financial capacity to do that. So it's one of the reasons why it's really important for entrepreneurs to take care of their own mental and physical health, so that they don't get, if they do start to get stressed out about all of this, they have a way to deal.
Life is an endless stream of challenges, but no worries. Manuj is bringing the world's best minds right here for you.
My gosh, Manoj, you just blew my mind.
Thank you, universe. Manuj, thank you.
I'm so grateful.
It makes me feel a little bit better.
Thank you.
Bootstrapping your dreams is here to give you what you need to succeed.
Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. And today we are going to be talking to Brion Crum. So Brion is an amazing entrepreneur, an amazing human being, and he is doing some amazing thing in the real estate industry. And I met him in an entrepreneurial community called Alliances, and we'll dive deeper into it. But I've had lots of good interactions with Brion. Welcome to the show, Brion. And to get us to know you better, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then how did you get here at this level of success?
Yeah, Manuj, it's great to be on the show with you this morning. Really a pleasure having met you through our Alliances entrepreneurship community. My name is Brion Crum. I work in the investor relations side of a Scottsdale-based real estate company. And when you talk a little bit about who I am and where I came from, it actually goes back to the fact that I grew up on a farm in Ohio in a very small town. So a lot of what I did when I was a child was really just around, what do you do when you live on a farm? You grow your own food. The local business owners are your neighbors and friends and things like that. And I didn't really realize when I was growing up that my dad was an entrepreneur, because my dad would get up every day, he'd get dressed and he'd go to work. But what it didn't really click with me when I was growing up, that he went to work because he owned a business. So between owning a farm, which is almost like the ultimate entrepreneurship, because there's so much risk involved, you have no control over what happens, like with the weather and what you can sell your crops for. But after I started learning a little bit about what entrepreneurship was, I realized that I grew up in an entrepreneurial community, because my dad was a small business owner and a farmer.
That's awesome. And so how was that when you came to that realization? How did that impact your life, and how has it impacted your life moving forward as you're doing things in real estate and other ventures yours?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about it is I'm 50 years old now, and I didn't really realize what true entrepreneurship was until I was in my 30s. So it took quite a while for me to go through that journey. And part of it was because when I went to school at Ohio State, I went there to be a pilot and go into aviation. And for a few reasons, I ended up never getting into that industry, but I went into finance.
Okay.
So I kind of went down that route of working in financial services, working with different brokerage firms, being a financial advisor. And it really didn't dawn on me what being an entrepreneur was until after I'd gotten to Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was advising as a financial advisor and an insurance representative, an entrepreneur who had started a company, and I was doing their 401k plan and selling their corporate health insurance.
Nice.
And I remember this day, and it was probably back about 2005. And we're doing the enrollment meeting, and I looked at the two founders of the company. I said, "This is a great little company you have here. What do you really need to grow? Like, what's next?" And they said, "We need money." So what they meant was they needed growth capital. As a traditional financial advisor, you're usually not in the position to help early stage companies. So I knew that I couldn't help them raise money directly. So I introduced them to a friend of mine who became their CFO. He brought in a group of his investors that were like retired corporate executives and board members that had this little investment group. And what they did was they helped that company grow from 5 employees to over 50, and it was eventually acquired by a publicly traded bank as a strategic acquisition a few years later. So I've always looked back on that experience as kind of being that point where I realized what it meant to be an entrepreneur and how we could help them by helping them get the right connections in the communities.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very important point. The more I get into entrepreneurship, the more I realize it's mostly about the network you create, the communities you are part of. Because as an entrepreneur, there is so much to be done. You cannot accomplish much yourself unless and until you have a team around you, or people who can help you whenever you run into these situations, whether that's money, whether that's operations, sales, marketing, whatever it is. So is that sort of your realization as well? And is that you are part of communities like alliances?
It is, yeah. Looking back and reflecting on that event and helping that company. A few years later, when I was doing some networking as a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch, there was this really interesting group of about a dozen people that would get together every Tuesday morning in Old Town Scottsdale. And it was interesting that there was a little bit of a theme behind it. It was totally informal, but it's like, okay, there's an investor, there's a banker, there's an engineer, there's an IP attorney, and then there's like marketing people, and everyone would invite a friend that needed help. Sometimes it was inviting an investor that needed to find deal flow. Other times it was inviting your friend that started a company or had an idea, and just figuring out how to make those connections. And that was around the time that I had met David Kogan, who became the founder of Alliances. And he said, Brian, there's something really cool about what we're doing here, but we need to find a way to scale it. So that was what the launch of the Alliances entrepreneurship community was. And then the concept was, let's bring together the resources and the entrepreneurs to help each other. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't typically necessarily associate yourself with traditional chambers. So we wanted to create a community that really brought everyone together, help people understand what you needed to do to start and grow your business, and then tie all those pieces together.
Yeah, yeah. And so, can you share with us some stories of success stories, or other ways that you have been able to leverage your network? Because I know you have a huge network of very successful and very how can I say it, like helpful people who are not just in it for themselves, but they help other people genuinely. So, can you share with us some stories of how this has been impactful in your life and business?
Yeah, there's a couple stories about how we've helped start and grow some companies that really come to mind. The first one is almost entirely related to helping one of these engineers that was an early member of Alliances get to the point where he had a prototype, proved it worked throughout the network, scale it, and then ultimately do an equity crowdfunding campaign through some of the approved SEC portals where other members were able to invest into the company. And now this company is scaling globally. And then I'd love to share a couple examples of what we're doing at Caliber that really ties into the entrepreneurship community and how we're able to help each other. Um, one example is that many of the investors that come to us at Caliber to access the different real estate funds and portfolios that we have, they're typically people that have started and grown a business and they've been successful. And then they get to a point where they are either investing the profits from their business, maybe they've invested into their own retirement plans, or the people that have actually gotten to the point where they've been able to grow and sell their business, and then they have to find a way to reduce taxes and create income off of the wealth that they created through the private ownership of their business. So we've been able to help a number of our alliances members access these types of investments through Caliber. And then I want to touch briefly on what in the last 4 or 5 years has become like the almost like the new trajectory for my career as it relates to investing in real estate. And it was a program that was started as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It created what are called opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are designated census tracts across the United States that were areas that were designated to have been left behind by the success that was created of the recovery off the last recession. So specifically what we do is we help someone who has potentially sold a company or stock or real estate invest those capital gains into these opportunity zones, and then they receive a number of tax benefits. And we have been able to use this to build and launch a co-working space, which is going to help even more people start and grow their businesses. And recently we just invested into a sustainable modular affordable housing business that we're then going to use to build apartments in these opportunity zones, including right across the street from the co-working space that we built.
Oh,
Some really cool examples of how we meet interesting entrepreneurs that have come up with a business idea, and then we can help them scale it through the opportunity zone program.
that's great. And so, our audience is international. So, like, what are some of the? I mean, I know Alliances has become international. There are many international members as well. But do you find a lot of people who are from different countries and in this community? And how can they like sort of even if they are not part of Alliances? What will you say? As an experienced entrepreneur about joining these kind of communities elsewhere in their local country or what have you, can you share some insights on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it actually goes back to the fact that without COVID forcing people to shut down in-person networking, we never really would have had the same opportunity to scale internationally. Yes, we did always have some members that were maybe from Canada or Mexico or a few places where they had ultimately emigrated to Arizona, which is where we founded it. But when we decided to take the Alliances platform virtual, we started getting entrepreneurs from literally all around the world. We would log in on a Tuesday morning for one of our meetings, and there'd be someone from Singapore, there'd be someone from, another Pacific Island nation. We'd have Canadians, we'd have Israelis, we'd have people in Europe, and they're all gathering together because there's this shared, interest and passion for, being an entrepreneur themselves and then wanting to help others. So the one thing I always say is you just have to, give it a shot. So if someone wanted to learn more about it, they can become one of our guests on one of these Tuesday morning virtual meetings, learn more about what the community is and find out if they think that there's a way that they would be able to benefit. And then also, more importantly, in many ways, be able to give back to others in the entrepreneurship community.
Yeah, I think that's the key point to come and join the community, not just as a taker but also as a giver, because that comes back multiple times. Now, as you have gone through this journey, I'm sure, like all of us, you have made many mistakes and learned important lessons. So, can you share with us some important mistakes that you remember, or obviously those mistakes taught us the important lessons? So, those lessons that you can share with others.
Yeah, when I look back on some of the failures we've had helping friends launch and grow companies, it seems like there's always this one common theme about founders wanting to save money on their engineering costs, and they end up building software the wrong way. So fortunately, inside of the alliances, we actually have enough of these experiences where some of our members now basically are software developers that come in and fix other companies' problems when they build technology. So we're very careful about how we approach the launch of a company. I'm going to give you the example of one that was actually launched by a need that we had within the Caliber hospitality portfolio, and how we went through, the different steps where you go from the idea on a paper napkin to a fully built, funded venture-backed company in a relatively short time period, and actually hit the Inc. 500, Inc. 5000 list of fastest-growing companies in the first try, and is now the fastest growing company in Arizona. But we paid a lot of attention at the very beginning, literally not to build any technology or software until we had talked to our customers and our users and found out what was important to them.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I always recommend to people is make sure you're talking to who your end customer is. Don't just build something because you think it's cool, whether it's a product or a piece of technology. So you really want to be very conscientious upfront about making sure that you're not building something that people don't need or that they're not going to interact with. So that company is called Quick, QWICK, and Quick was created because we knew that there was a problem finding temporary staff members when our hotels would get busy. So we wanted to find a way to help bring on new staff members, be able to rate them, match them with good job opportunities. So it's really a lot of like creating that platform or marketplace, just like Lyft does for drivers and people that need a ride. So Quick built it to help the venues, the hotels, the restaurants, the stadiums, anyone that needed the workers to align directly with the worker and give both of them a lot more control and visibility over the process. And we were able to take that from the idea on a paper napkin to venture backed in about 18 months. And part of it was because of the approach of building out the software after using the lean startup method.
Of
So
course, of
really
course,
like
yeah.
to encourage that and offer kind of some of the things that we learned, including how you have to do big pivots, when COVID hits and you're involved in the hospitality industry. A Caliber inside of our hotel portfolio, we had to look at what was working, what wasn't working, make those pivots. And the same thing within Quick, where we have thousands of people that are working in hotels and restaurants that are basically unemployed. So the real quick pivot that needed to happen there, after a lot of tough decisions by the leadership team and a lot of sacrifices by the staff and the employees, was to be able to move those workers over to where they were needed, which was in the grocery stores and also the hospitals. So by being able to help those industries, we were actually able to grow the company to a higher point of revenue by the middle of 2020 than what it was a year previously. And then be able to come of that, show that pivot to your investors, raise more capital. And that's another example of how you just have to be flexible and you have to be willing to pivot. And there's a lot of times where you're going to have to make some pretty significant sacrifices when you're an entrepreneur.
You are listening to Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show with Manuj Aggarwal. Businesses face numerous challenges like finding the right product market fit, determining the market size, implementing a winning go to market strategy, crafting customer centric USP, competitive analysis, looking for funding, building up cash flow and profitability. We have made a lot of free resources available to the entrepreneurial community, including this podcast. We invite you to check out our websites and follow us on social channels. The links are in the show notes. We hope you find the resources useful and utilize them to grow your business. We also have some programs for entrepreneurs. If you find our content useful, then you will definitely find the programs outstanding. So do check them out. I think, as you said, like being flexible is the key, and being able to sort of, let go of those conceptions that you may have. Like it really takes you to take the ego out of the process and just sort of see what is the best course of action for everyone involved, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, having been involved in startups myself, like that is another point where I see a lot of founders. They get passionate about their idea and they really forget about the end consumer. They actually start to build the software for themselves, how they see the world rather than their consumer. So that's a great point that you have mentioned there. Now, the other thing is about how do you handle all these ups and downs emotionally? Like, as you said, COVID hit, and now there is a talk about recession. There is a talk about venture capital drying up. Like, how do you what are your insights for the audience about how to handle these cycles, which are sort of part of normal business cycles, economic cycles?
Yeah, a lot of that comes back to making sure that you have a flexible business model, that you're not locking yourself into only heading in one direction. And actually, during times of turmoil and times of distress, that's where the opportunities are created. Because if everything's going along great, people may not have a reason to change from what they're currently doing. So, as it relates to real estate in particular, part of what is happening now is everyone's looking at, well, interest rates are more expensive. It's harder for people to buy homes. What can we do to either reduce the cost of the homes, or how do we make it easier for more people to have to live if they want to live in apartments? So right now it's just a lot of doing pivots between different asset classes. I think the most obvious thing that came out of the recession is whether or not companies even need offices anymore. So
Hmm.
definitely, I think a lot of opportunity to repurpose adaptive reuse for office spaces. As an example, Caliber inside of our opportunity zone portfolio, we bought a corporate office building from one of the big three banks, and we are in the process of renovating it and converting it into spaces for other companies that needed smaller footprint but didn't need a whole office, and even the headquarters for charter schools. Um, so I think there's a lot of examples where you can look at what does that particular building have as an alternative purpose, and what does that community need. And in our case, we converted a retail location into a co-working space, and we converted a bank into a school. So I think just being flexible and looking for where the opportunities are when you come into tough times
Yeah, yeah.
is one of those approaches.
That's great. I mean, it sort of falls along the line of what we were talking about earlier, where we need to be flexible and look for those opportunities. But then the next question comes in, because I've when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, they say, okay, yeah, but how do you discover those opportunities? How do you figure out what is the gap in the marketplace? What is your answer to that?
You get out in the community and you talk to people.
Mhm.
You ask them, what's your experience? What are your challenges? What are your opportunities? Um, and that could be with your local community. It could be if you're in a certain type of industry, getting out there. If you're not meeting people face to face, set up meetings with them, do Zooms. Get feedback, ask people, what are you seeing, where do you think the challenges and opportunities are, and then just find a way to either within your business to make some of those changes, or maybe you say, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing for me, shut it down and pivot and do something else. So part of that comes back to having the mental and financial capacity to do that. So it's one of the reasons why it's really important for entrepreneurs to take care of their own mental and physical health, so that they don't get, if they do start to get stressed out about all of this, they have a way to deal. And then also, it's important about why you have to build a financial foundation. So you really have to make sure, as an entrepreneur in particular, that you have a much bigger, runway of cash and resources. Because when we do run into these tough times, you don't want to have to shut your business down, because you couldn't make payroll after like 2 weeks of rough times. So being able to take a step back and look at what foundation did I create for myself, financially, as well as, what do I do for my mind and my body during these times.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Stress is the number one sort of cause for all the diseases, I'm guessing. So, what are some of the ways that you take care of your mental health? Because even going through the last 2.5 years of this whole global sort of stressful situation has caused a lot of problems in people's lives and businesses. So, how did you deal with it? What are your suggestions to the audience on how to get their mental health and physical health in shape?
Yeah, I deal with that both mentally and physically by being outdoors as much as possible.
Mhm.
So when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, I was fortunate that I was living literally out in the middle of the desert. So I actually spent more time outside when the pandemic hit. I started going for hikes and walks through the neighborhood, meeting and seeing things that were in my community in my neighborhood for 15 years I had never experienced before. Did a lot of mountain hiking. So I used that time to kind of, get into shape. And then, because a lot of people were moving to Scottsdale from other areas, my wife and I decided to sell our house last year, and we started traveling around the country. And most of it was in areas that were near oceans. So I like to spend a lot of time, going for swims in the ocean, um, you know, walks on the beach. And then we recently moved to Maui, where I can hike up a volcanic mountain on one side and then go down to the beach on the other. So I like spending as much time as possible outdoors and being able to, conduct a lot of your business on a cell phone. You can take an hour or two off and get some exercise and then, decide, hey, I've got some meetings I have to do, and not feel like you have to be locked in an office. So being
Yeah.
outdoors and being active is something that if people can do it and fit it into the lifestyle, I highly recommend that.
Yeah, and it's also sort of learning about yourself, like what really drives you, what really keeps you calm. So as you said, like you found your sort of oasis in Maui and other places that you like to visit, beaches, deserts, and a lot of other people prefer more solitude, quieted, whatever one's sort of calling is. We should recognize that. And what I feel like, some people, they do figure out what makes them calm and helps their mental health and physical health, but they just don't take the time, and they just keep sort of delaying it and saying, okay, once I get to a certain level of success. Have you found that in your experience?
Yeah, you definitely have to get to a point of realization and prioritize. Um, Everyone feels that they're just so overwhelmed with everything. So, taking a look at the way that you schedule your time throughout the day, and make sure that you're doing the most important tasks first, and actually scheduling, even if it's only 15 minutes of that time for yourself, whether it's to meditate or just to kind of take a step back, go for a walk, around the building or the office. So it's identifying, what you could do to potentially be a little bit more efficient, and then actually scheduling that time for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. All right, great. And so, once another question that regularly pops up is, as you enter a new business, generally most businesses are, most industries or sectors are competitive. So it's very rare that you enter into a business and you have a very unique value proposition. We are basically selling similar things, but at the same time we need to have some sort of a uniqueness about our business, about ourselves. So what is your recommendation, because you've been part of so many businesses? How do you differentiate yourself from the company or the entrepreneur who's competing in the same sort of industry with you or a sector with you?
Sometimes it's just looking at where do you think that you have some sort of an advantage, and then being able to focus on that and then share that with others. And part of it comes down to you've already found some people that want to do business with you. Find ways to turn them into raving fans, find ways to support them, bring them into your own community. So instead of having to compete with someone who's doing something that's similar, just look at what you've been able to do so far to be successful, and find ways to focus on that. And part of that is getting to know who your customer is. Now, if you're selling a widget, that's one thing. But if you're doing something like we do, which are these are 3, 5, 10-year relationships, do everything you can to support them, so that even if they do see that there's another company doing something similar to what you're doing, they don't feel that need to go and make a change.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a very important point. Like a lot of people do not understand long-term investment into relationships, right?
Hmm.
And as we said earlier, like once you join any community or you're building a relationship, the more you invest in it, it just sort of accumulates and compounds over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely about those relationships. That's for sure.
Awesome. Now, what about like in your own life journey and your business journey? What kind of help did you get, like from mentors or coaches or people who are ahead of you? Because I find that that is one thing that creates a quantum leap, if you will, in people's lives. So, have you had that experience? And if so, can you share with us, what impact any of your mentors or coaches had on your life?
Yeah, looking back on it, I never really realized that some of these people were mentors. And it took a while, and I was actually able to reach back to a couple of them and thank them for the help that they gave me. In some cases, before they passed on, or just before they retired. So there's definitely been a couple people that I learned a lot about people and the hospitality industry from, that were my original mentors. So I am thankful that I was able to tell them how much that meant to me before we lost them too early.
Mhm. Yeah, it's obviously, it's sad that somebody who has a wealth of experience, they pass on without sort of writing it down or sharing it. But the more we can sort of get from them and implement it and pass it on, that's just these ideas build upon other ideas. Great. Well, this has been such a great, entertaining, and meaningful conversation. Thank you so much, Brian. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely, Manuj. I really appreciate that. This has been great. Love spending this time with you today. I'm really easy to find on the internet. You can see my name there on the screen, Brion Crum. You can email me at brian@eliances.com. So that's Brion at ELIANCES.com. Or feel free to just Google me, connect on any form of social media that you feel appropriate.
Great. We'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you so much. Great topic of the day. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning in to Bootstrapping Your Dream. Bootstrapping Your Dream. We bring you life-changing insights about starting and growing your business, making your life and family happy. Given the fact that you listened to the whole episode, we know you are an awesome fan. So why not help us spread the message? Please share the podcast with others who can benefit from it. And if you are feeling extra generous, leave a review on iTunes or any other platform where you are listening to the podcast.